Let's face it, homes that are cheaper are more appealing properties to buy. And sometimes these homes that are cheaper for a reason, because they need some work. And at face value, this may look like a good project to take on. But often when people are buying real estate in our area, especially for a lot of the out-of-towners, they really underestimate what it takes to get a property renovated in our area. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about why you may want to go ahead and spend a little bit more money and get a property that's already renovated versus taking on a property that needs a lot of work and one that can turn into a bit of a nightmare. And I'm going to get started now. Hey everyone, my name is Jamey Prezzi. I'm a real estate agent in Miami-Dade and Broward counties. I work with my husband, Ognjen Prezzi, and our team. Today I'm going to talk to you about why you need to always think twice about buying a property that needs a lot of work in our area. People really do underestimate what it takes to renovate a property in our area, and I think it's just an important topic to cover, so I'm going to talk about that now. But first, before I get started, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another update. We do put out new videos every week. Also, use the link in our information box and download our free guides today. On that guide page, I also have a lot of additional information, so I hope you find it helpful. Just click on the link in the information box and you'll get access to some really good information. If you would like to schedule a chat with us, use the Calendly link in the information box, or you can use the old-fashioned way, which is just to give me a call, text, or email me. Okay, let's get started. Sometimes when people are buying properties in our area, they really underestimate the amount of work it takes to get a property renovated. You may be coming from a different area where you already know a lot of contractors, or maybe the rules are not so strict where you are from and you renovated your house without any issue, or your condominium without any issue. But in our area, there are a lot of rules and regulations around this type of work, a lot of permitting regulations that if you don't do right from the beginning can create a huge nightmare on the end. So I just always recommend that people think twice about buying a property that needs work, because maybe just go ahead and buy a property that's already renovated so you don't have to deal with that. Obviously, if you're a local buyer and you already know contractors or have friends and family who know people who can help you, that's really a different story. This is really more for the out-of-town buyers who are just not super familiar with what it takes to renovate in our area. One of the most important things that you have to think about when it comes to buying properties that need work in our area is who is going to do the work, because you have to make sure, obviously, that you hire the correct person. Now, if you're buying in a condominium, that person needs to be licensed and insured. They have to go through the condo association to even get into the property, and you need to make sure before they start pulling plumbing out of the walls that they are properly licensed, because if they're not, that's going to be a huge nightmare for you if they create a leak that goes into units underneath you. So just remember, especially if you're buying a condominium, you have to know what you're doing so that you don't create issues that can turn into a nightmare, especially within your building and with your neighbors. Sometimes people think that they can just hire people and they'll just come in and start working and you don't need to tell anyone. But I will tell you this, once they start banging on stuff, all of the neighbors will know. You're going to get a call from downstairs, and you know, it's not always pleasant if you're doing it kind of like under the radar. So again, who are you going to hire to do this work? Obviously, they need to be properly licensed and insured to do that work so that it also covers you as well. And when you're thinking about doing work in our area, you also need to make sure that you pull the proper permits. And it really depends on where you're buying this real estate and what is required for that area. Obviously, you're in the county of Miami-Dade if you're buying real estate in Miami-Dade. And then from there, every area, every little part of the city has its own rules and regulations. For instance, you have Coral Gables or Miami Beach or Miami Shores. So you have different areas throughout the city who have different rules and regulations. And some areas may not even allow you to do some of the updates that you're thinking about doing. It just really depends on the area. Some neighborhoods, some HOA communities, they will even control the color that you can paint the house. They may even control the color of the mulch that you want to put in your yard. Yes, it's true. I've seen it, and I've seen homeowners fined for not using the correct color of mulch. So listen, it's just important to know where you're buying and what the rules are for what you want to do if you're doing some type of major renovation. installation. And another thing I want to talk about, especially for the condominiums, is if you're thinking about maybe like installing a washer and dryer. Are you even allowed to install a washer and dryer? Because some of the older buildings, especially on Miami Beach, they may not allow you to install a washer and dryer or even a dishwasher or even a sink disposal, because the pipes of that building cannot handle those type of installations. So it's just always very important to know what you're buying, where you're buying, what are the rules of where you're buying, so that you can make sure you make a good decision, because maybe you don't want to live in a unit where the laundry is a common laundry. Maybe you want to have a washer and dryer in your unit, but the association doesn't allow it. So these are the little details that can become nuances down the road if you don't know about the area where you're buying and what are the rules for what type of property you're buying. Next, I always tell buyers to ask a question of, why wasn't it done before? And I see this a lot, especially in single family homes, or actually even condos like what I just mentioned before. Why did they not put a washer and dryer in that unit before? Because probably it's not allowed. A lot of times washer and dryers are just not allowed in these older buildings. So you always have to ask the question of, why was it, especially if it's something that's sort of like a common thing that we all expect to have in a home right now, why was it not done before? I see this a lot in single family homes too. So let's say they've decided to install impact windows everywhere. Well, they've installed them everywhere, but that one there and this one there is not done. The door's not impact. Why? Why, when they were already doing that, why did they not do it? What I find that happens a lot is probably it had to be custom ordered and it was very expensive, so they just said forget it. Maybe the city doesn't allow it. Maybe it requires some type of architect to come in, do some drawings, and it's just a hassle. So always ask, why was it not done before? Because if it was not done before and it's gone through a series of different people owning the property and everyone had an intention of updating it, maybe it's a headache, and that's why everyone keeps selling the property, because they can't do what they wanted to do before. So always keep that in the back of your mind. Why was it not done before? The next thing that I always tell buyers to ask is, who will do the work? Of course we know contractors. Of course I have a vendor list, but it's not like they're just hanging out waiting on my clients to call them. People get busy, especially good contractors. They get really busy. And so sometimes you'll just have to hang out in queue and wait for them to start your project. And once you find a good contractor, they continue to get busy. I've had contractors that I've had for years, and all of a sudden I can't reach them anymore because all of my clients use them, and then all of my clients' friends started using them, and they're just too busy now. So there's a lot that goes into hiring a good contractor, and if you're not experienced with that, I don't know, you have to think about if you're willing to take that risk or not of finding someone who can do the project. And then you have to ask the question if you can wait for these good contractors to get around to your work. Remember, there are a lot of people who are moving into our area, and so these people are busy, and that's just the nature of where we are at this time in our market. Another thing you have to think about is the climate that we live in. We live in a very humid area, and there are a lot of storms that start throughout the different times of the year. We have, in the spring, we have a lot of storms in the afternoons, and then obviously throughout hurricane season, we also have a lot of storms throughout that time of the year. The high humidity can really exacerbate issues with mold, moisture issues, or even pest infestations. So how long can you live with these issues before getting them addressed? Another thing to think about is the cost of these renovations. Miami is not a cheap city. I'm just going to say it like that because that's the reality. And with these contractors and really high demand, I can tell you that the cost of materials is probably up. I know it's already up throughout most of the United States as well. But buying a property in our area where there's a high demand for contractors and not enough supply of them and also of the materials, that can create a cost of renovations, maybe a bit more than what you expected in the past. Time constraints. If you know anything about Miami, you know that we're not typically an on-time city, and that trickles down to a lot of things that go on in our city. So if you are someone who is expecting things to be turned around very quickly, I can tell you, you definitely don't want to buy a property where you have to renovate it immediately, because renovation projects in our area are notoriously long and they can take some time, and dealing with people who don't always show up on time can become an annoyance if you are an on-time person. So just keep in mind that Miami is not known for being on time, and projects do typically run a little bit longer. And last but not least, the prices in Miami have definitely gone up over the years, and the real estate market is still very competitive. So if you are looking for properties that come at a good deal, you still may find a bit of fierce competition with these types of properties. So don't just assume that if it's a cheaper property that needs a lot of work that a lot of people will not be interested, because probably they will be. The biggest takeaway from all this, even though I may sound like a negative Nancy when it comes to like buying properties that need work, I have people who do it all the time, and they renovate these properties and they make them incredible. So I get it. If that's you, I totally understand. I say go for it. We'll help you do that. Maybe you didn't think about all these issues that I just brought up, because these are things that I talk to our buyers about all the time when they're thinking about buying these properties that need some work. I would just say, if you're doing that because you're trying to save money, take a step back, put pen to paper, and maybe it makes sense to just go ahead and spend a little bit more money and buy a property that's already renovated, so you don't have to deal with it when you're here. All right, I hope you found this video helpful. My name is Jamey Prezzi. This is my husband, Ognjen Prezzi. We're always here to be a resource for you, and we'll see you soon.